Hey, this is Mark A. Altman, and if you like Inglorious Trexperts, you'll love Disco Nights, the new Star Trek Discovery podcast hosted by Chase Masterson, featuring special guests every week. Don't miss it every Thursday night, wherever you listen to podcasts.
This is not Bill Shatner, but if you like the 4:30 movie, you'll love Inglorious Trexperts, available wherever you listen to the 4:30 movie. You might even find out what God needs with a starship. It's the podcast for Star Trek fans with a life. Back in the 70s and 80s, before the advent of VHS, chances are if you saw a classic movie, it was on the 4:30 movie. With their famous theme weeks, it was a chance to see movies you never saw before and get reacquainted with some old classics. So join us now for the 4:30 movie.
Hey, this is Mark. I was lost in thought there for a second. I was on the Frontier Trail, Pilgrim. This is Mark A. Altman, and welcome to Go West, Western Week. Yup. So, hey, partner. I'm so glad to hear me with my amigos as we go west.
Holy cow.
Okay.
Welcome.
We recorded a lot of podcasts today. And I'm here with Cowboy Darren.
Howdy.
I'm here with Scout and Eagle Guide STEVE Melching.
Hey there.
And over here, I got the mysterious stranger, Ashley E. Miller.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfuckers.
Hey, you haven't gotten the idea of this. It's Westerns.
Oh.
It's Westerns, like the Old West.
Isn't John McClane a cowboy?
It's like when the Brady Bunch went to that old Western town. Or, perhaps you remember the great Batman villain, Shame.
Yes.
Played by Cliff Robertson. Now you're getting the idea.
He looks like a rustler to me.
Wow, I'm excited, because Westerns are a genre, sadly, that don't get a lot of love these days. And it was once the genre of choice. All the great filmmakers were making Westerns for the most part. It was dominating movie screens, particularly when you were playing two movies, a cartoon, a newsreel. Westerns were everywhere, whether it was Poverty Row B pictures or A pictures. Some of our greatest directors were associated with making Westerns. People like, of course, John Ford and Howard Hawks and Willie Wyler. And it's so great that, we could honor the Western this week. I think a lot of people, in a way, people say that the Marvel movie superhero genre, science fiction before that, supplanted the Western. And I hope we can, if somebody's not a Western aficionado, may point out some great movies that they should see. Or if you are, revisit some old classics, as Darren said in the introduction. Our job is simple. We curate a week of fantasy, a theme week of movies that we recommend on our TV station here. It has no antenna.
TV station of the mind.
It's the TV station
There's
of the
no
mind.
antenna, there's no gate, there's no stockade.
We control the horizontal.
Welcome to Channel Rurapente.
Rurapente. Penal asteroid. It sounds really painful.
Well, you gotta have that checked.
Can we get through one of these episodes without a Star Trek reference?
No, but I know she changed your shirt.
I did.
And you have the look at that great 4:30 movie logo wear.
Designed
it's so
by
beautiful. Designed by Darren Docterman. That's
in
an
the spirit
homage
of Conan.
to Conan.
Ready to kick ass in highly Hyborian ways.
And I will explain how it ties into my pick in a moment.
Oh, John Milius?
No.
Okay.
But good
All right, then.
So, well, Steve, since you bring it up, you grew up a lot in the West. You were in Colorado.
And my father was a big Western fan. Obviously, as you mentioned, Westerns were huge on television and in the movies, especially in the 50s and 60s. So all of us grew up in a time when those TV shows were in reruns on TV, and a lot of the films were making their way onto the 4:30 movie as the afternoon movie, and my father introduced me to a lot of Westerns and kind of instilled a love of the Western in me, and so I've always been attracted to these movies. So my pick is a movie that I heard while I was in the womb, because my parents saw it in the theater a few days before I was born in 1968. And I'm talking about Sergio Leone's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I just adore this movie. It's my favorite of the Leone spaghetti westerns. A lot of people would say Once Upon a Time in the West is better. I disagree. I like it, but
I kind of love the middle one, the Lee Van
Few
Cleef.
Dollars More.
A Few
Yeah,
Dollars More
that's
because
a good one, too.
I love the watch.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's a great pick. And Once Upon a Time in the West.
It's a classic.
It's a classic, and that opening scene at the train station is one of the great. And then Charles Bronson shows up with the harmonica.
Oh, it's great. It's wonderful. I love Once Upon a Time in the West, but Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I like watching more. I think it's super entertaining. You know, it's Clint Eastwood as the bounty hunter, the good, Lee Van Cleef as the mercenary, the bad, and Eli Wallach as the bandit.
Yeah, it's so great.
Ugly. And
I love, it was interesting. What I love that you're picking this is, if you noticed on War Week, one of our listeners posted on Twitter that they felt we should have gone with The Good and the Bad and the Ugly because it was a Civil War movie.
Yeah.
And I felt like we really missed one. Sometimes I feel like, okay, fine.
I don't know if I would consider it a Civil War movie. It's a movie that takes place during the Civil War that involves a hunt for Confederate gold. And they intersect with Confederate and Union troops.
Although if we'd had Clint Eastwood searches for Gold Week, it would have gone perfectly with Kelly's Heroes.
Yes, that's Clint Eastwood searching for gold. I love it. But no, I think this movie is so quotable. There's two kinds of people in this world. The way that dialogue continues,
the kind with guns and the kind who
those
dig.
with loaded guns and those who dig.
You dig. You dig.
Two kinds of people in this world: those that come in through the door, those that come in through the window. It's super entertaining. I actually prefer the theatrical cut. To me, the director's cut that's out on Blu-ray now is a bit flabby.
It's a little indulgent.
Yeah, but I think it's just a terrifically entertaining sort of deconstructed spaghetti western. Called a spaghetti western because they were made by Italians, largely in Spain. Hence my Conan shirt, which was also filmed in Spain. That was the connection.
Just spaghetti.
It's a minor connection. But they just embraced the iconography. Leone embraced the iconography of the Western and sort of subverted it, deconstructed it, and just made this terrific movie about this trio of gunslingers, always trying to get one up on each other to see who can get to this gold first. And it features, for my money, my favorite Ennio Morricone score. He's done a lot of great ones, but man, the ecstasy of gold at the end of that is so terrific when Tuco is going through the Sad Hill Cemetery looking for the gravestone. Fabulous. The three-way gunfight at the end with that sort of endless intercutting of the huge close-ups and the tension building and building.
Just think of the late 60s, how groundbreaking also that opening credit sequence was, too.
Yeah.
It's just great.
Yeah.
What a fabulous pick. I mean, it's just a great movie. I mean, all the spaghetti westerns are wonderful that Sergio Leone was making, the trilogy, of course. I mean, you almost could get away and say the Man with No Name trilogy, because all three of those movies are fantastic. But of course, Monday is only so long,
and the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is so long.
So long.
I think we're gonna have to preempt the local news today because we're gonna be into prime time. What aired on ABC on Monday nights? You remember back in the day?
Scarecrow and Mrs. King.
That was CBS. You're absolutely right. That was Monday. Monday was a kind of weekday. Cagney and Lacey. It was Cagney and Lacey, I think, on CBS. I'm trying to remember what was on ABC.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember Monday nights because I never watched TV at night.
See, I like Cagney and Lacey, and oddly enough, years later when I was at film school, one of my favorite professors was the co-creator of Cagney and Lacey.
Oh, you're going to say Sharon Glass. No, that's great. But a fabulous pick for Monday. So Tuesday, Darren.
I've gone back and forth about what my pick for Tuesday would be, and because
it's contagious.
I love the classic westerns from the 40s and 50s, and I really enjoy the deconstructionism of the spaghetti westerns. But I think what I'm going to go with is what I think of as the first postmodern western, an attempt to bring back these elements that were loved from when the makers of this saw them as kids. It's 1985's Silverado.
Oh, what a nice choice.
Lawrence Kasdan wrote and directed, and it has a cast of hundreds. Well, maybe not that much, but all these
big stars.
Amazing. Well, not necessarily stars, but quality actors in all these varied parts. And it's just a listing of actors that we would see for 20 to 30 years later, and it's so much fun.
Well,
Hunt.
you know who steals that movie, and what my favorite thing about that is Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
And what happened was Kevin Costner played the dead roommate in The Big Chill. He
Right.
cut him out of the movie.
Right.
And Kasdan said, "I'll make it up to you. I'm going to write you a role."
Yeah.
And then
And
he
it's a
wrote
great-
the perfect
it's a
role
great
for
role.
Kevin Costner.
Yeah, as Jake, the younger brother.
It made him a star.
To Scott Glenn.
My biggest regret with that movie is apparently the studio was not happy and they cut it to shreds.
Yeah.
And there's a version where there's a lot more, because Jeff Goldblum, Linda Hunt have very small parts.
Right.
There's a much longer movie, and it's never been released. And it's not on the DVD or the Blu-ray
Do you
or
have the
anything.
footage?
I don't, and I would really love to see that version of the movie. I
Yeah,
have a feeling
me
it's
too.
pretty awesome.
I mean, Brian Dennehy plays the baddie in it, and he's so good. He's so good. But he's playing it completely straight and normal. He's not doing the mustache twirl.
No.
He is right in his mind. He is correct, and he just differs with Kevin Kline, and they have a serious altercation that happens. But he's so cool.
And that
he's
was
so
that
cool.
period when Brian Dennehy was in a lot of shit, and he was basically a
FX.
big star. FX.
Yeah.
And he
Bestseller.
was a star
Bestseller,
Right.
yeah.
because he was just great.
Yep.
Because he brought gravitas. Because he brought like a certain character. Whether he was the good guy or the bad guy, you would just eat him up on screen. Just so much charisma. Completely fantastic.
That was back in the day when you say, "Oh, Elizabeth Dennehy on The Best of Both Worlds was Brian Dennehy's daughter." Now you'd say, "Oh, Elizabeth Dennehy's father is Brian Dennehy."
Yeah.
But and he shines in a movie that is filled with other movie stars.
Yes, Danny Glover.
Oh my God! It's just so you go down the list of all these great Jeff Goldblum, like you mentioned before, is in his 3 minutes of screen time in the final cut, is great, and he has a great character, and it's just John Cleese shows up for about
Yes.
10 minutes.
And he steals the movie.
He steals the movie.
My
He's
jurisdiction
great.
ends here.
But it's taking all these sort of Western tropes and sort of giving them new life and breathing new fresh air. Unfortunately, it didn't do well at the box
It
office.
did not do well at all.
It flopped. I think the studio had no idea how to sell this
None.
to an audience who had no idea what Westerns were, first of all.
Well, coming out in the middle of the 80s,
Yeah.
it felt very old-fashioned.
Absolutely. And it
I
is,
didn't
and
see
that's
it when
why
it
I
came
loved
out.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, and doing these sort of meta modern takes on the Western weren't always easy, because Silverado does it effortlessly,
Right.
Whereas something like Pale Rider,
Which came out, I
was
think, at the same time.
Clint Eastwood's
Right.
take on Shane, is unwatchable. It's not unwatchable.
Well,
it's not very
Pale
good.
Rider is basically kind of a half-assed.
It's
so-
Shane.
it's also High Plains Drifter.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's kind of a sketch for Unforgiven.
Mm-hmm.
It's and it kind of plays like that. Pale Rider plays like Eastwood is kind of figuring out what he thinks needs to work in something like Unforgiven. I don't know that you could get to Unforgiven without Pale Rider, but Pale Rider had the benefit of having Clint Eastwood in it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know.
No, that's true.
Well, and another thing I love about Silverado is the score.
The score
It's
is
an
glorious.
Yeah.
Bruce Broughton.
Bruce
so
Broughton.
Good.
Oh,
Yeah.
so
What else did he
terrific.
Well, he also did a Young Sherlock Holmes,
Sherlock Holmes.
which
Young
we also
Sherlock
have
Holmes
talked
and-
about admiringly on the show.
Yeah. He's just a great composer in general.
Yeah, Bruce Broughton's great, really great. Great choice.
So that's Tuesday.
Yeah, that's a great choice. Love that movie. Saw it at the Kingsway with my dad. Ashley, Wednesday.
So on Wednesday, I am.
Here it comes now, Con.
God damn. No.
You've made
No,
this. You've
no.
made this situation for yourself, Mr. Miller.
Of course, I am choosing Hard Day's Night. No.
What?
No. Seriously, we're going back to Italy. We are going back to Sergio Leone, to my favorite of the Man with No Name trilogy, for a few dollars more.
Yeah. Okay.
At the time that this movie was released, it wasn't as popular. It wasn't considered as good as A Fistful of Dollars, and it was sort of lost with the release of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But honestly, I think for a few dollars more is the pinnacle of that series, because it is so deeply emotional in such unexpected ways. The premise of it is that Clint Eastwood, the Man with No Name, Manco, and Lee Van Cleef, who plays Colonel Mortimer, are both bounty hunters, and they are going after this terrible bandito, Indio. And the story of Indio, and this is where things get really interesting, right? Because everything about Indio is horrible. Everything that he does is horrible, and we know that at one point, like he's busted out of jail at the beginning of the movie, but we know that at one point several years ago, he acquired this musical pocket watch from this woman that he was raping, who killed herself in the middle of it. And he's haunted by it. He's haunted by his crime. He is haunted by her suicide. He bursts. There are these scenes where he just sits and he cries. And it's weirdly affecting. And the great thing about it is that it makes it difficult to go black hat and white hat. I mean, look, there's no question that what he did was awful, but it's hard, like as just a cinematic exercise, not to empathize with him when we watch him in terms of just the pain and the weird PTSD and all of this other shit. So we've got that, right? And then what we've got, other than kind of all the machinations of the heist and all this other stuff, is this very personal mystery at the heart of this story, where what you find out is that Colonel Mortimer is after Indio for some very specific personal vengeance-related reasons, which don't become fully clear until the very end of the film, when Mortimer and Indio get into it, right? And Indio has this thing where when he has a gunfight with you, he flips open the musical pocket watch and it plays its song, and when the song is done, then you shoot. So in the fight with Mortimer, he takes Mortimer's belt and his gun, and now Indio has nothing. And Mortimer has nothing, and Indio puts the musical pocket watch down. Now we start. And the music starts to play, and Mortimer has no gun, but he's Lee Van Cleef, and he's a badass, right? And if this is how he goes out, this is how he goes out. And then just as the music begins to fade, the music starts up again. And there's the Man with No Name, Clint Eastwood, and he's holding another musical pocket watch. It's a pocket watch that he stole from Colonel Mortimer. And what you realize is that the woman who haunts Indio was Mortimer's sister. And Clint Eastwood takes that pocket watch, he puts it down, he hands Mortimer his gun, steps back, and he says, "Now we start." And Mortimer wins the duel and kills Indio. And it is this beautiful, wrenching moment that just moves me every single time. And the thing that's amazing about the music in this movie is not just that, look, Ennio Morricone is a genius no matter what he does. But what he does in this film is he takes music, and there's like technical terms for this shit, and I wish I knew more about it. But
Lucas Kendall, line 5.
Right? He takes the music that is a part of the scene,
Source music versus
and
score
it's like
music.
there's diegetic and something,
Yeah.
and it's and he blends that into the music of the scene. So like the musical pocket watch turns like into this sweeping orchestral moment.
Right.
But it's not like the score is telling us what to feel. It's not like the score is doing Sergio Leone's job for him, because the visuals are supporting it. It is such a beautiful marriage of sound and visual and writing and acting. I mean, these guys have miles and years etched on their faces, and they all have pain. And it's a beautiful, beautiful movie. I cannot recommend it highly enough.
No, I mean, I truly love that movie as well, and I think part of the reason that I like it better than The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is only because I love Lee Van Cleef in that movie, and when he comes back in Good, the Bad, and the Ugly as a scumbag, I sort of always hated that. But it's the stopwatch. I mean, and there's probably no composer that we associate more with the movies than John Williams. It's Ennio and John Williams. Star Wars, you can't imagine Star Wars without that John Williams score. Close Encounters without that Raiders without that John Williams score. The spaghetti westerns you can't imagine without that Ennio Morricone score. Right. And those are both sensational choice. I mean, it's and I think it's the shortest of the films too. So I would recommend, if somebody's going to watch these for the first time, they probably should watch them in order. The Man with No Name trilogy, and build up to A Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, rather than watching for Fistful. You watch Fistful of Dollars, watch it for a few dollars more, then watch Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and then watch Once Upon a Time in the West.
Yeah, I've always really liked that movie as well. I always preferred it to Fistful of Dollars, and it's interesting. Those 3 films were all released in the United States in the same year. And Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was not very well received by critics, but it did very well at the box office. And it's just a terrific trilogy.
Box set of all of them, and I was home with the flu, and it was the first time I ever watched them. I had never seen them before, and I watched them all, over the course of a week, and it was just like, oh my God, these movies are great.
And was it Fistful of Dollars based on
Red Harvest and
Sanjuro? Yojimbo, yeah.
Which was kind of Red Harvest.
Which he comes back to a couple of times in his career. Clint does.
For sure.
Yeah.
I like to think of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly as kind of You Only Live Twice of Man with No Name movies. Like where maybe that really isn't. That's when it begins to go bananas in the James Bond movies. And I love The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Don't get me wrong, but suddenly it becomes this much bigger
huge.
thing, huge scope, and there's like fighting in the background, and like there's armies and shit, and like
literal casts of thousands.
Exactly, it's like you half expect the team of ninjas to drop in at any time, and it's so and like over the top in a great way, but it never loses all the stuff that we love about The Man with No Name.
But I love what Morricone does with sound, and you mentioned that with the pocket watch in that film. He does some great stuff in Good, the Bad, and the Ugly as well, where I'm thinking of the scene where Eastwood is sitting in his hotel room and his revolver is disassembled on the table in front of him, and he's cleaning it while the Eli Wallach and his assassins are creeping up on him, but he can't hear them coming because this column of Confederate soldiers is marching through the town, and then suddenly they're called to a halt, and he hears a single spur jingle coming from the hallway, and that moment of tension where he's racing to reassemble his revolver before the assassins burst in on him is just wonderful. And of course followed by Clint gets the drop on the gang, but only to discover that Eli Wallach has come in the window behind him saying, there's 2 kinds of spurs, those that come in through the door and those that come in through the window.
See, I'm just kind of shocked because I was sure that Ashley was going to say Once Upon a Time in the West because, of course, it starred Henry Fonda, a.k.a. Henry Ford, who we know he's so fond of.
He's fond of Ford.
So that comes to surprise. But another, so far, what a sensational week of movies, huh? It's up to me to ruin it.
We're only through Wednesday.
Yeah. Only through Wednesday.
What are we going to watch on Thursday?
Well, I think there's only one choice for Thursday, Outland. No. No, not Outland. I will say, look, one of my absolute favorite Westerns of all time is John Surge's The Magnificent Seven.
Oh, yeah.
But because Bill Goldman passed away today, I'm going to have to go with my second favorite Western, which is Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Brilliantly written by the late Bill Goldman. It lives in that world between the John Ford Westerns and the meta Westerns of Silverado. It's very much a product of its time in the 60s, deconstructing the Western myth. But, it is that amazing two-hander of Robert Redford and Paul Newman, Ted Cassidy.
Yeah.
Ruck. And for those of you at home who haven't seen What a Little Girl's Made of. And are we ready for our luminous and sheer luminosity, blinding luminosity in Catherine Ross?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, as the love interest of the Sundance Kid, this movie is so funny and tragic and just brilliantly written.
And it's self-aware.
Very self-aware. And who are those guys? Super posse. They robbed a couple of train cars, and they decide that they're the company, the bank that's being the E.J. Harriman decides he's going to send out a super posse to chase them down. And most of the movie is about the super
Lord
posse.
Baltimore?
All these great mercenary bounty hunters, everybody but Boba Fett is on, and the Mandalorian is on their trail, and it is so great. And of course, there's that classic scene where they jump off the waterfall, and Robert Redford doesn't want to do it, and he says, "Why? Because I don't know how to swim." Well, don't matter. The fall probably kill you. I mean, it's so great, and a beautiful score. I'm not talking about the song "Raindrops Are Falling on My Head." That's fine. It really captures. It's wistful about the death of an era. It's the motorcycle and the Model T are coming in, replacing and of course the guys realize that the frontier is disappearing and there's no place for people like them, and so they move to Bolivia, where they feel they can get a new start. But reinventing yourself isn't that easy, no matter how far you run, and it's just a magnificent movie. And
I never thought a Western could be funny in that way. I mean, obviously I'd seen, the Mel Brooks Western, Blazing Saddles, but this is a different kind of comedy. And I think this was maybe the first movie that I read the screenplay for before I saw it. I read the screenplay that was published in William Goldman's Adventures in the Screen Trade.
The seminal tome.
Which everyone should
writers.
read if they haven't. It's a fantastic book, Adventures in the Screen Trade. And I read that screenplay in the back of the book after reading it, and I'm like, this is really great. And I think I went to the cinema library at USC and threw on the Laserdisc and watched it. A really wonderful film. Yeah, it's definitely a top 10 Western for me too.
There are a couple of sort of, for us, for the three of us that are writers, there are a couple of legendary figures. W.R. Burnett, Robert Towne. But probably looming, first and foremost among all the giants is Bill Goldman. So it was a real loss when he passed away today, and just somebody that we can all learn so much and only hope to be half as good, or as he was. It's really and it's just an amazing movie. I'm just like, even if he hadn't died, it probably should be my pick. It's just I've always loved Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. It passes. We've talked about this before. The Godfather test. Where if it's on TV,
you just watch it.
I can't turn it off. And I was really delighted to find, because it was in my, in addition to having the Blu-ray, I have the digital version on my iTunes, and it, basically was recently kicked up to 4K, and it's not available on 4K Blu-ray, but Fox has done a really good job with some of the library, and I just was like, oh my God, Butch Cassidy is 4K now on my Apple TV. This is awesome. So it makes it even more fun to watch. So I highly, highly recommend Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And, it was tough because Magnificent Seven was the Western, my go-to Western as a kid. I would always watch on TV when it was on, and it was on a lot. But I'm really glad. I have no
Bush
regrets.
And Sundance, it does not feel old-fashioned. It doesn't feel stuffy. It's just a very light on its feet entertaining,
George Roy Hill
solid
again.
movie.
And the direction is super modern. The cinematography by Connie Hall. Again, is textbook. If you talk about Goldman being textbook, for anybody who's interested in cinematography or any member, the ASC. I mean, Connie Hall's cinematography is the stuff that a semester is made of film classes. And it's not medicine. Even though we keep talking about this is the template for screenwriting, for cinematography, for directing. It all tastes really great.
And it's less filling.
Tastes great.
Less filling.
Tastes great.
Less filling.
Bob Uecker. That was sports night. So that was Thursday. That takes us to Friday.
This is going to be a bloodbath.
So many.
So you don't like my
movies
Outland
for Friday.
suggestion?
No.
Well, then try this on for size.
I actually kind of like Outland, but
Outland, I do too. Yeah. Outland ripped off this movie, High Noon. And High Noon is not only, again, a staple of television's past growing up, but a very important film. Carl Foreman, Stanley Kramer, who produced it, Fred Zimmerman, who directed it, making a statement against the blacklist, a man abandoned by his friend who stands alone to do what's right. And Gary Cooper, who there's no more sort of, other than John Wayne, who American icon. But the fact is, John Wayne was a super conservative who did a lot of horrible things, whereas Gary Cooper, was conservative, but he did a lot of things right by people. A really great man, really great actor, and it's a very special film. Shot here in town on the what was then the MGM lot. And now the Sony lot, and in fact, you see that big boom up at the end. You can see the electrical lines and telephone poles in the distance that didn't exist. So this big, boom up into the wide master, and it's kind of like, oh, where'd those come from? Well, that's Culver City. That's the Sagebrush Cantina. Well, that's not there anymore. But it's just such a special film, and Lloyd Bridges is in it, and. I got to find a word other than luminous, because Grace Kelly breaks the luminous meter and goes beyond luminosity to just a whole nother world.
The candle power of that woman.
I loved Grace Kelly.
It's like the top of the Luxor, only different.
Not my favorite Grace Kelly role, but still, she is. She's great in it. The villain Frank Miller is.
No relation.
No relation. The Dark Knight returns to fight Gary Cooper. It's short. It's a super short movie. Yeah. The whole conceit of it taking place in real time. You're waiting for Kiefer to show up at the end as the clock ticks down to noon. Great score by Dmitry Tiomkin. There's a wonderful book about the making of High Noon that came out a year or two ago, which I highly recommend, and it deals a lot with the blacklist and Carl Foreman and Stanley Kramer, and it's a really, really great book about the making of the movie. If you're a fan of High Noon, I really recommend that book. I forget exactly what it's called, but you can look it up online and see. In fact, maybe I'll do that. But yeah, High Noon is something I would recommend.
I mean, there's a whole, just off the top of my head, I could just give you a ginormous list.
Well, what are some?
Okay, so Red River.
Yes.
It's definitely a different sort of Western than the kind that we've been talking about. It's about a cattle drive, and it's about, all the things that sort of happen along the way. But the action is amazing. It's beautifully shot, and it's just a great film. The Searchers. Right?
Yeah,
The Searchers is a
cannot have a John Ford movie on this list, right?
Absolutely not. And, John Ford, what he does with that movie is actually quite subversive, because the premise of that film is that John Wayne plays a character whose daughter is taken after his family is killed when is it the Apaches who attack? And he goes off looking for his daughter. Jeffrey Hunter is in it. Jeffrey Hunter, Captain Pike.
Really? Jeffrey Hunter played Captain Pike?
Yes. Yeah. Right? Well, some of these people who we can't see don't know. They go off looking for her, but what you discover very early on is John Wayne's intention when he finds her is to kill her, because he does not want her to be sullied by the Apaches. So there's actually, it's not just, wow, it's great to see you again, Dad, but when they do get reunited, spoiler alert, the suspense is, what is he going to do? And the beautiful thing about the movie is that the journey has taken him to a place where he embraces her, where he is,
Well, they were
father.
looking for her for years.
Yes.
So they've all changed dramatically in the time that it's taken to find her. And, he says, as far as the turn into the earth, I'm going to find her. And you get, he basically is on a mission of revenge. To him, she's dead already. Whether she's alive, whether the Apaches have killed her or not. For Jeffrey Hunter, it's about finding her and bringing her home.
Yep.
So they have two very different agendas.
There is, this is sort of a fluff piece, but I enjoy it. Hang 'Em High, which I think was it Ted Post or
I think it was Ted Post.
yeah, who also directed The Gauntlet.
Yeah, I like High Plains Drifter better.
Oh, I love High
High
Plains
Plains
Drifter.
Drifter is a good
It is so bananas. It's like basically it's a Man with No Name movie, except that there's this town where they all essentially conspire to kill the sheriff, and like when the Man with No Name literally in this case shows up and he kind of takes over the town. It's very surreal. It's almost Fellini-esque. There's even a dwarf. It's just it's crazy and awesome.
I want to say one thing to our millennial audience, because they're going to watch The Searchers and be very offended by the treatment of Native Americans. And they're going to say, how could they recommend this? Or this is, heinous and, it should be banned or whatever. The reality is, this movie is a product of its time. By watching it, you're not endorsing that depiction of Native Americans. You are not in somehow complicit in an act of barbarism because you're watching this movie. It is a product of its time, and it is a great work of art. And it's the same reason that if you watch Triumph of the Will, that doesn't make you a Nazi. And, I know there's a lot, particularly in colleges these days, where people feel like, we should suppress things we disagree with or that we have outgrown. And, a lot, particularly in Westerns, you'll find a lot of that. There's a lot of, depictions that are very unfortunate and through the lens of today are very racist. But, we can't pretend.
Neo-Maoist long march through the studio back catalog.
Yeah. But that was better put than I would have put it. So, yeah. So
A denial of the past is not going to help the future.
And those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it, which is Santayana, of course.
So a stylistically very different film, but awesome. Kind of one of the best siege movies ever made. Rio Bravo.
Yes.
Oh, really?
John Carpenter's favorite movie.
Yep, absolutely. He essentially remade it with Assault on Precinct 13.
Right.
There is we talked about High Plains Drifter. We have to talk about Unforgiven, but I almost
waiting
like
for that.
bookmark
Yeah.
that and kind of come
Yeah.
back to Unforgiven. We talked a bit about Pale Rider. I mean, look,
We didn't talk about Shane, though.
look, Shane is great.
Yeah.
Brandon DeWild, and of course the Jack Palance is one of the most loathsome, the man of one-arm push-up fame.
And Jim Mangold loved that movie so much that he makes it a big thing in Logan.
In Logan, yep.
And which reminds
that.
me that his favorite movie, and it's also great, also Clint Eastwood, is The Outlaw Josie Wales.
Oh, yeah.
My problem with Logan, and I love Logan, is that in Shane saves the family.
Yeah.
In Logan, Logan does not save the family. And I felt that was the biggest misstep of that movie. I don't think, it's tough when your hero fails that
He fails
abjectly.
completely.
Yeah, and you really care about those characters. And again, I'm not dissing Logan because I think it's probably, it's a really extraordinary film and it's great. But I felt like that was really a mistake. But anyway, that's me.
I want to mention a couple different ones that I have on my list. One of the earlier entries, and certainly one of John Wayne's earliest, Stagecoach.
Yeah.
That's my list too. I love
Stagecoach.
He's so fun in that.
Yeah.
He's not the icon or the legend
Right.
yet.
He hasn't been weighted down by experience.
The Ringo Kid.
Yeah. It's really exciting. It's riveting. It's a little what's the word? Unformed.
Yes.
It's not a slick film by any stretch of the imagination, but it is well told, and it has a very forward moving direction, and it's very exciting and interesting.
It has one of the great stunts of all time that inspired Raiders also.
That's correct.
Right.
Which
Yakima
is-
Canutt.
Yeah.
when he jumps
The
onto
transfer,
the stagecoach from stagecoach to stagecoach,
Yep.
and and this with live horses and all kinds of stuff going on, and none of the safety precautions or harnesses or things that we have now. Certainly no CGI. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It's never not entertaining.
Exactly, and that's why it's on my list. And on the other end of that list is
Spectre of the Gun.
another
Podcast.
certainly postmodern Western, Dances with Wolves.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Which basically tells this Western story from the other side, and tells about the encroachment of the frontier by the white man from the Native Americans' point of view.
It's a great movie. Great John Barry score too.
For John Barry scores, it's one of the best.
And I
They have fighting words.
I still vividly remember seeing this movie at the Universal City theaters up there at City Walk, because I was loving the movie so much, but I had to pee like you would not believe, but I didn't want to leave the theater because I hate leaving a movie in progress, especially one that I was really enjoying. And it felt like that movie had like 4 endings, because each time it would sort of fade out, like, okay, I finally go pee, and then it would fade back up, and like more awesome stuff
Well,
would
you
happen.
could have always taken the Maury Chaykin route and pissed in your pants, and no one can do it.
Finally the movie ended, and I loved it, but I'm
Then you were stuck in a
running
line.
to the bathroom, like kind of half crouched, bent over, and
That was an Ang Lee film.
getting into the stall, and I had to go so bad I couldn't go. Whenever it happened, I don't know.
He doesn't know how
That's
the movie
horrible.
ended. It's amazing.
No, but
Put that in your
a
book.
fabulous movie.
Couple-
Dance with Wolves,
yeah,
so great.
couple
Hey,
of
I got a
suggestions.
few.
Go ahead, please, Steve.
My runners up, and this was a really hard list for me. I'm sure it was because there are so many great ones. Little Big Man, Arthur Penn's movie starring Dustin Hoffman and Faye Dunaway. Another film about a guy who falls in with a Native American tribe, and you really see, their side of the story about what's happening in the West. Just a beautifully made movie. So sort of funny. It kind of deconstructs the Western with Dustin Hoffman going through his gunslinger period and his gambler period and all that sort of thing, and then being adopted into this tribe and the rivalry with the other young warriors in the tribe, and culminating with the Battle of Little Bighorn. Dustin Hoffman ends up as a scout for General Custer, who's this total blowhard in it. Just a really entertaining, but also sort of wistful, sad, wonderful movie. Of course, The Magnificent Seven. We can't just talk about Westerns without mentioning The Magnificent Seven. I'm sure that was on the tip of your tongue.
John Sturges. It's
And
Yul
talk about
Brynner.
an iconic score, iconic cast.
Well, it's so iconic that Yul Brynner comes back in Westworld as basically Chris from The Magnificent Seven as a villain.
Just a movie that it's one of those movies that's so famous maybe you haven't seen it. See it. It's just as entertaining.
We're
Obviously,
talking about the original Magnificent Seven,
original
not,
Magnificent
not the
Seven, yes.
Anton Fuqua remake.
No,
Yeah.
the original, of course, based on Kurosawa's Seven Samurai film. I think a more entertaining version of that story, Seven Samurai,
It's
is
so
a,
great.
is a
And Eli
masterpiece
Wallach is
also.
part of why that movie works so well as the villain.
So good.
It's like there's so little religion left in the world that I can see for myself. Don't see, do.
And a movie that I was not expecting to like when it came out, but I ended up loving it. It was the year of the dueling.
Cavaliers.
I know where you're going.
No, the
Wyatt Earp movies.
The Wyatt Earp movies, and I expected Wyatt Earp in the wake of Dance with Wolves to be the great one.
Right.
But no, it was Tombstone.
Tombstone is so
which
good.
is so entertaining.
And so quotable. Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday is he is perfect. Actually, the history in that movie is actually fairly good. The real gunfight at the OK Corral. It's like Ike Clanton shows up and he doesn't have a gun, and he's like, I don't have a gun. And Wyatt Earp grabs him and throws him behind him, and he says, well, get out of the way. And that's why Ike Clanton survives that fight. And just that movie
Walter
is
Koenig
so
was
great.
and
Inspector of the Gun. Oh my God, Michael Biehn
What a cast! Yeah, Michael Biehn,
so great.
of course.
There is a
And
hole
no
in
one
his heart,
expected
and he
that to
cannot
be.
kill
It's
enough
like
or
The
drink
Abyss
enough
and
to fill
Deep
it.
Star 6 had come out, and Deep Star 6 had been better than The Abyss. It was like, with Wyatt Earp, which was
you
Lawrence
think it's
Kasdan
yeah.
and Kevin Costner, and everyone expected that to be like this great
Had
thing.
all the
And then-
pedigree,
and then
yeah.
it was Tombstone. It was the Dante's Peak versus Volcano. It was the same day that Volcano was like sort of more entertaining than Dante's Peak.
It's such it's a popcorn movie that just fires on all cylinders,
And it's about
still holds
something.
up. Yeah,
It is about something.
No,
I mean, just the death of Doc Holliday when he looks down at his feet. And isn't this funny?
Well, I mean, a couple others. More recently, the assassination of Jesse James.
yeah.
That coward Harold Ford.
Yeah, but
that coward
one of the most
Gerald
beautiful
Ford.
looking,
Wait, what?
one of the most beautiful looking westerns ever, and that's saying a
Yes.
lot. Recently, Sisters Brothers came out this year.
I wanted
It's
to see that. I
Terrific
missed that
movie.
one, yeah.
I love both versions of 310 to Yuma, the original
too.
with Glenn Ford and the remake, the James Mangold remake. I think they're both really great.
True Grit and True Grit.
Yeah.
Both versions
I
of
like
True
both
Grit.
of those.
Hateful Eight.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Django Unchained.
But the thing, why I wouldn't say the Hateful Eight, and I love the Hateful Eight.
Because it's a stage play inside.
Well, no, because it should be seen in the theater. It shouldn't be seen on TV. You should watch it in scope.
I disagree.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I love
Because it all plays in this one room.
not the first 20 minutes.
Yeah, but the first 20 minutes have no bearing on anything.
No, I love it.
I agree. It's beautiful, but it could be a stage play and work equally well.
I love the whole experience of seeing it in scope and in the theater and with the.
Let's just agree. We love the Hateful Eight.
But we do.
Sure.
I absolutely. I love the Hateful Eight. Robert Altman's McCabe and Mrs. Miller. No relation.
You're not related to Mrs. Miller?
No.
Or
con-
McCabe.
And
No
we
kind-
should interject for just one moment to mention that we've disqualified the Wild Bunch.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm
from
glad
this
you said that.
discussion. We love the Wild Bunch; it's a masterpiece, but we already discussed it in a previous.
There's so many other Peckinpah films, though.
Yeah.
There's Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid.
Yeah.
For all you
Yes.
Bob Dylan fans out there. So many great things. But I want to talk to you specifically, Steve, because I don't know if these guys will know.
I think I know what you're going to
You
say.
do know. I was going to talk about those great Randolph Scott movies, the
Bud
1950s, the
Boddickers.
Bud Boetticher
Randolph
films.
Scott.
And, this would be a real tough one for me because you have the great Seven Men from Now with Lee Marvin, which is terrific. But then there's, these were these low-budget Westerns with Randolph Scott that Bud Boetticher made a bunch of them. They're super
lean and
short.
mean.
They're
They're
like
70
70
minutes,
minutes
75
long.
minutes.
Yeah.
The Tall T. You have Richard Boone as the villain. And then Ride Lonesome, which I love,
Westworld.
with Karen Steele, who was from Mud's Women.
wasn't like the-
They're all, I let
Decision at Sundown.
yeah, but Decision
Buchanan
at
Rides
Sundown,
Alone.
Buchanan Rides Alone are not as good. Like to me, if you're-
Comanche Station. I
Comanche
like.
Station's good.
Yeah.
I love Comanche Station.
Actually, we should have a conversation going at the same time. like
Decision,
these guys.
Decision at Sundown and Buchanan Rides Along, not so great. But boy, Comanche Station, Tall T, Ride Lonesome, and Seven Men from Now, so great. And they're probably, if you watch them all in a row, the running time is probably less than The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
I will say,
It's true.
I have seen. Look, I thought of myself as like a Western maven. Like I know my Westerns, and I have seen none of those. So I want to see like a list.
There's a DVD box set of the Boddicker Westerns that includes all of those except for Seven Men from Now.
Right,
which
because
is sold
that's Paramount.
separately. They're fabulous.
Now, this is sort of like, you remember years ago, you might not, there were a bunch of Hitchcock movies that were out of circulation for a while, like Rear Window, Vertigo, because the estate owned them, and then Universal finally made a deal to release them in theaters, and then they got rediscovered. It was kind of like this. The John Wayne estate owned all these, but for some reason, he's not in them, had nothing to do with them, but I think they funded them. So they controlled the rights to these Westerns. And I guess it was about 10 years ago, maybe a little more, that they finally went back into circulation. They were rediscovered. Martin Scorsese introduces them on the DVD. We saw Seven Men from Now in Telluride, and it was a
restored
freaking
version.
revelation.
Oh.
Never
I'd
heard
never
of Bud
heard it,
Boetticher. I knew Randolph Scott, but hadn't really loved any of his movies, even though, what's the one that Jerry Goldsmith did the score for that everybody loves? Anyway, so, it was a revelation.
Great theme song. A
Scott
song
do-
We were
Seven
singing it all
Men.
weekend. Seven Men.
Did Randolph Scott do the first Last of the Mohicans? Or am I crazy?
He might have.
I don't remember.
I don't know. But okay, Friday. Guy.
And then, I want to mention Three
Last
Amigos, a guilty pleasure of mine. I love the Three
Blazing
Amigos.
Saddles. Oh, you mentioned Blazing
Blazing
Saddles.
Saddles. And then we haven't circled back to Unforgiven
Yes,
yet.
we haven't. which, my God, is like it was
a masterpiece.
It's totally a masterpiece, and it was written like in the 1970s, and Eastwood got it and he put it in a drawer and he kept it until he was old enough to play that role, and he took it out and he shot it essentially as written.
Screenwriter of Blade Runner, it's worth noting.
100%. And it marinated for all of that time in his mind, and it became an expression of everything that he had to say and that he had said. With his Western films, the character journey of William Money. When we meet him, we're told that he was a man, who drank too much and he killed too much and just everything. But then he met a good woman, and she settled him down. He found religion, and he stopped swearing and he stopped drinking, and he stopped killing. And then one day, after she's gone, a young man, Jamie Wolvett, shows up and brings him along on a kill. And what happens next between Clint Eastwood and Gene Hackman is total gold.
Yeah.
And the moment that Morgan Freeman is along for the ride, and Morgan Freeman is captured and he's killed, and they put his body out in front of like the tavern or whatever the hell you call it, and the saloon, and playing too much D&D, and Jamie Wolvett and Clint Eastwood are sitting up in this hill, and they're looking down, and Jamie Wolvett, who'd been the kid, right, who is so excited about this gig, about this job, about doing this, right, about becoming a killer, like the reality of it is just hitting him.
He
and
didn't
he is
have a
having
taste
breakdown.
for it. Yeah.
And that wonderful scene, it's like, do you think we got you think we got it coming? And Clint Eastwood says, "We've all got it coming, kid."
We've all got it coming.
But cinematically, it's a brilliant moment because he's sitting there as like Jamie Wolvett is talking, all this stuff, and he's unscrewing his bottle of bourbon. Mm-hmm. And you realize what's going to happen when he takes a swig. Oh, shit.
As
and
those
then,
ominous storm clouds are gathering on the horizon behind him, it's absolutely
perfect.
stunning.
You do not worry that Clint Eastwood is going to die in this movie. Yeah. You worry that the beast has been unleashed, and wow, is he? It's fantastic.
I've killed women and children. I've killed everything that walks or crawls at one time or another, and I'm here to kill you, little Bill, for what you done to Ned.
Gene Hackman is such a great villain in this movie. An anti-hero or I don't know what you call him.
But you know who else is great? Richard Harris is English Bob.
Yeah. English
Oh
Bob.
my God. And it's all the myth of the West, which is completely deconstructed, which is why I think Unforgiven's our movie for Friday. But
I think
the only thing that can knock it off, and I don't think it will, but I got to put it out there, we haven't talked about it, is The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
I love Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, but
I think that Unforgiven speaks more to both the future of Westerns and the history of Westerns.
Okay.
And its gravitas in itself makes it the choice.
I
for
mean, I
Friday
love
in
the
my
whole
mind.
message of Liberty Valance, print the legend, not the reality. There's so much relevance that it's a great, Jimmy Stewart's great in that.
Yep, absolutely.
Lee Marvin's amazing. But
Eastwood did the score for Unforgiven too, didn't he? Did
no,
he write
it
the
was
score?
wasn't
No.
it Jack Nietzsche, his usual guy? Or
Yeah.
no,
Oh, okay.
or who was it? Let's
A
see.
beautiful guitar score. I mean, it's just haunting.
Let's see. Let's see, just to make
for some
sure.
reason I thought Eastwood did that.
Composer is Lenny Niehaus.
Okay.
That was his usual guy.
Niehaus.
Yeah. So look, we all agree. Friday, Unforgiven.
I love it. I mean,
I'm
it's 3
in.
Eastwood movies in a week, but
Wow,
you know
that's
what?
a lot.
Eastwood is
I gotta say that's
the
a lot.
icon of
A lot of
Westerns.
Eastwood and no John Wayne
Sorry, John. Sorry, Pilgrim.
John.
and no Lee Marvin.
Here's the thing. I mean,
No Cat Ballou.
there are so many great westerns. It's like I
And no
think we
City
could come
Slickers.
back to this
No
place
Clifton
again.
Little.
If westerns are truly life from lifelessness,
No,
We will
look, I
revisit
think we
this.
will go west. Maybe we'll go east. I don't know. Steve, Monday.
Monday was The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Tuesday.
Silverado.
Wednesday.
for a few dollars more.
Thursday, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And Friday is Unforgiven. This has been Go West Week, Western Week, on the 4:30 movie. And partners, will be back next Friday with an all-new episode of the 4:30 movie. Wherever you listen to podcasts, brother. Meanwhile,
Wow, what character is that? That's amazing. I don't think I've ever heard a voice like that ever.
we, Meanwhile, we hope.
my goodness.
Okay, I'm done with that. Meanwhile, we hope you all check out our sister shows, Inglorious Trexperts, the Ultimate Star Trek Podcast, and Disco Nights, a celebration of Star Trek Discovery, featuring host Chase Masterson and her special guests. Meanwhile, does that make them special? Or are they just
Absolutely.
guests? I don't know. Meanwhile, if you want to check out previous episodes of 430 Movie or purchase some of our fantastic 430 Movie logo wear like Steve's wearing right now and the Theater of the Mind, you can go to the 430movie.com website, or you can suggest future theme weeks or tell us how we messed up at Twitter. There's so many Westerns. I can't wait to see what everyone has to tell us we missed. It's always interesting to see the response on social media to like, oh, how come you didn't mention this or that? Or it's always interesting. It'll be interesting to see.
And tell us if we have too much Eastwood in our Westerns.
You know,
much East in our West?
I think instead of going west, we went eastward.
It was almost Eastwood Week.
So, but you can follow us on Twitter. You can also follow us at Facebook and YouTube at 430 Movie. And if you're feeling really generous, please go to Apple Podcasts and rate us 5 stars. There's a pot of gold waiting for you there. Finally, again, a very special thanks to Bill Ritter and Natalie Muscali here at Electric Studios for making this show possible. And until next week, on behalf of
Whoever the hell
Little Steven. Oh no, that's the E Street Band. Can't be Little Steven. You know, English Steven.
6-shoot Steve.
Dangerous Darren. Ashmaster Zero. And Cowboy Mark. Thanks for joining us here on the 430 Movie.
See you on down the trail.
See you on down the trail. Eyewitness News starts now.
This episode is brought to you by Omni Consumer Products, OCP. Good business is where you find it. Makers of the ED-206 Urban Pacification System. Big is back, because big is better. And the 6000 SUX, an American tradition.
This podcast is a production of the Electric Surge Network.